You're listening to the Middos podcast with Uziel Naparstek. Before I introduce our next guest, I'll have a little story. A few weeks back, I did a reaction on Jewish Child, which was covered by Yaakov Shweki and Eighth Day and Tali Yess, and I had it scheduled and released for Mitzvah Shabbos. So it went out on Mitzvah Shabbos, after Mitzvah Shabbos, and like a half hour later, like very little time, I got a comment from Tali Yess saying some information of behind the scenes of the song, and it really touched me that I got such a comment from the original singer from that song. So especially when his father composed that song. And so I comment back and we had a little exchange, and you can find that in the video. And then a few weeks later, I got a request to interview him, and I thought that was a great idea, especially with such a start of me getting to know him. So I got in touch with him, and we interviewed Tali Yess, and we went really deep about the history with him and his father's history, music, and entertainment, and going more advanced and ahead of his time when it came to entertainment for Jewish entertainment. So please join me as we go B'Pnimius with Tali Yess.
Pnimius, oi Pnimius, Pnimius, oi Pnimius, won't you come and join us? Oh, great, a podcast. Shh, we're about to start.
All right, here we are with the legendary Tali Yess, who is a singer in his own right, and also he is the son of the famous legendary Moshe Yess, who has produced many albums, although also collaborated with one of my favorites, Avi Rottenberg, and literally changed a lot of Jewish children's childhoods with a lot of good content, like videos and stories from Chelm, Avram video, and also with the Mamas Mushi story tape. Here we are with his son, Tali Yess. Reb Yess, welcome to the Panemios podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What an introduction.
Oh, you deserve it.
Thank you.
So I guess we're interviewing you. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
By myself. Okay, so my name is Tali Yess. My father, as you mentioned, was Moshe Yess. I'm one of 6 kids. I'm also, as you said, a singer as well. I do a little bit of singing on the side. It's not my day job, but it's something I try to do. And in the family, among my siblings, I was like the more musical one. We're all a little bit musical, but at the very least. But I'm the one that actually kind of took it seriously from a young age. And so naturally, a lot of when my father had passed, a lot of the responsibilities of handling and managing and all that stuff with the music side of things kind of fell on me because at the end of the day, it just made sense, and it was, I kind of just fell into it. Um, I myself kind of fell into doing music, um, outside of like the production side of things, kind of by accident. I always wanted to do music, but more of on like a arrangement, composition, that kind of thing. Not necessarily singing, even though I was pretty decent voice growing up. My brother and I were in a choir when we were younger. Um, Shlomi Sufrin, also known as Shlomo Simcha, used to be the choir master until he moved to, I think, forget where he moved. He moved out of Montreal. We had another choir
Shlomo
master.
Simcha moved to Florida, actually.
Right. I'm not sure if that's where he moved directly from Montreal, or if it was if he made a pit stop somewhere else in between. But that was like in the early days of that choir. We had a guy, Emil Bender, who was our choir master for many years afterwards. And then around Bar Mitzvah, I kind of got out of the choir because my voice was changing, and I had to focus on my Bar Mitzvah. And it kind of just like music. Although I was like playing instruments back then, it was more of like a background kind of music kind of thing, like doing simchas and sheva brachas and that kind of thing. More of a keyboardist. And then around my late 20s, I bought like a piano, like a full size, like electric, like weighted keys piano. And it kind of was, I don't know, it's like a whole different instrument. Like you play keyboard your whole life thinking it's like, oh, it looks the same, it's a bunch of keys, but really it's like a whole different vibe.
Yeah.
And my early 20s, I kept trying to play guitar and failed, and then I finally bought a really decent one. And I think I dropped like $500 on a used one that looked a lot like my father's growing up, and I was like it would hurt my Jew too much to give it away so quickly and give up. So I really found the time and patience to work around all the challenges I was having, and eventually I picked it up as like a second instrument, and always wanted to play like him. He was like, as you know, like my father was like a legendary guitarist. Um, like even like Yossi Piamento would be like watching him do things and I get blown away. And Yossi is a legend in his own right. And
Yeah.
so I was never able to really invest the amount of time that it takes to get as good as my father got. Like I just didn't have that kind of time. But I got pretty good. Well enough that I could teach it, at least the basic stuff to a lot of kids. I remember I had a show this year on Hanukkah I did in Houston, and a couple of my Talmudim from the Mesivta and Monsey that I taught music to showed up there. So it was like really cool. I was like, oh, look at that. And I remember like growing up, like a lot of us, growing up, there wasn't a whole lot of options for how would I say this? I don't want to say it and make it sound bad because a lot of really cool Jewish music out there. But I mean, like a cooler sounding Jewish music, it didn't sound like it came out of the shtetl, It sounded like American. That's kind of what made my father's music very special. He was like the first to really, you know, how would I say this? To really like, make Jewish music with Jewish content, but make it sound less Jewish and more like polished and professional and American and whatever.
Refined,
And
maybe.
not just refined, I mean, but he came from a professional Hollywood background, so it was a whole different, like a different type of music and a whole, different understanding of genres. He was a virtuoso in a lot of different types of genres. Some that people never really wrote Jewish music in mainstream Jewish music. And he kind of was all over the place. Like he didn't stick to one specific genre. Whatever the song called for, he just kind of applied the most appropriate genre to really evoke the right emotions and emotional response to whatever song he was doing. He was a master chordsmith. He did really complicated chords, which made it very difficult for a lot of us to try to play some of his songs. I remember like when I was first trying to like just put my first piano to good use. I was trying to show people, like different tutorials on how to play some of his music and like classic songs that like I should really know very well, like My Zadie, which I probably heard more times than anybody else I know, other than maybe my father. Um, and I remember I was giving like the simple, easy chords to play it. I remember years later when I kind of like put myself out there a little bit on social media. Remy Guerreri, who's like
Oh,
he's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant musician. And he was like, "Listen, I
his
can't."
story, his life story itself is like crazy.
Oh
Like
yeah,
the
he's
amount
like
of
he's like a musical rebbe. And so,
yeah.
so he was like, I can't, I can't in good conscience hear you like doing this. Like you need to like know that there's a few chords that you're missing in the song that will make it a whole like here. And I took music in university for almost 3 years or so. Like I should have really known. The reality was that I was just trying to make it simple and easy, and attainable, you know. But there's like the easy way, and then there's a right way. So he was like, you forgot the C major seventh over here, and you forgot the E suspended fourth over here. Not very complicated chords, but kind of extra little flavor that when you add it in, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, that's the right one. So he remember it sent me like a couple of sheet music. He does the sheet music for like everybody in the business. Like anybody that wants it done well, they go to him. So he reached out to me, sent me that, and he actually taught me the proper chords that I should be playing for my Zadie because I never really took the time to go through them the way I should. Now I'm a lot more careful. Now I'm a little more choosy about what I do. And I take the time to put music together as opposed to rushing into it. It's something my father didn't do. He didn't rush into things. He gave it like the proper respect and the time that it would take to really get the maximum output, that you would get from his music. And that's something I think that was special about him, is that he took it very seriously. He never really did it for the money. He did it because that was his tafkid. That was he found, like, that every Jew has a way to serve Hashem, and like one of his famous songs, called Rabbi Yitzchak Levi Pfeiffer, which is a lesser known song. Um,
I don't know it. I got to react to it on my channel. I really am. Moshe song that I don't know. I'm really surprised.
oh, there's quite a few. This may be one of the ones on the newer album. There's one that's being dropped very in the next this Friday, actually. Like, if you bear with me a second, I'll show it to you. Sorry,
Yeah, no problem.
pop out of the picture for a quick second. So this was the first solo album of my father. It's like after he and the Megama duo split up around the time where
Yeah.
my father left, was getting ready to leave Israel. We were all in Israel at the time, and so he decided to go solo. Is it on this one? I'm not sure. No, it's not on this album. But it was one of his solo albums. Anyway, it's a great song about a guy that who's like a rabbi of in Vilna, and he had for many years he tried to have kids, and like like he finally had a boy, and he was so happy, and he's like, oh, he's promising Hashem, my kid's gonna grow up and teach the Torah to everybody, and he's gonna do this and that, and it turns out the kid couldn't learn alphabet well, and he wasn't really good at the whole learning thing and everything, and his father was ashamed, and it was humiliating, and the boy grew up and moved away, and eventually like started becoming a merchant, selling things, and did his own thing. But he was really good at being a merchant, and he grew from rags to riches, and he became the richest of all Jews. And he was quietly giving tzedakah, and that's his way of serving Hashem, And so that story, the reason I brought it up is because my father, as well as myself, like we weren't born necessarily Talmidei Chachamim. Like we could learn a little bit, but we're not like none of us did a Siyam Shas, let's just say. And so he one thing he was very good at, was his music. He was excellent at it. When in his secular days, when he was before he did tshuva, he was incredible. Shared stages with some of the bigger names in Hollywood, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Association. Turned down the chance to be the guitarist, and later became Jefferson Airplane. It was a big band, and he eventually moved to Israel and became Baal Tshuva, and just was learning the ropes in yeshiva in Dvar Yishalayim. And he had his rabbi after a couple of years was like, Moshe, why do you look so depressed? He like, talk to me, man. So he's like, well, I got all this music in me, and it's not kosher. I can't use it. He's like, what do you mean it's not kosher? You're not eating it. It's like, it's just music. So it goes like, what's the problem? He goes, well, what? Come on, it's rock and roll and blues and jazz. I gotta tell you, rock and roll isn't kosher. Like you're the rabbi. You should know this by now. He's like, listen, the genre of music itself is not the issue. Even like Chabad Nigunim and many Hasidic songs came from like Russian folk tunes and Eastern European music, and they had the flavor of those geographic regions. I'll tell you, after studying music, there's a whole concept of modal music, which like you can almost instantly identify this, like where music came from just by the sound of the genre. And wherever Jews went, their music always adapted to these things over, throughout our history. Like in Spain, we had Ladino music. In Russia, we had, Nigunim. So many are in Russian, and Polish songs and Yiddish songs, and all over the place. And so in America, it would make sense, Jews are living in America to have American style music. As long as you're not singing "Oh Baby, Oh Baby," the kashrus isn't the issue. You're singing about what it's like to become a Jew and what it's like to keep Shabbos and walk into a shul for the first time, and different stories that have inspired you about like what brought you towards Yiddishkeit, then that can help many people. On the contrary, and sing it in whatever genre makes you feel good. And I can imagine only like him like thinking, wow, it only took you 2 years to tell me this. Gee, thanks. But him and his study partner, who was Shalom Levine, he was a master viola player. Um, they put together this group, and only this year I found out actually there were a couple extra instrumentalists in that group originally, which eventually, when they officially became Megama, they kind of like just became this duo. I'm not sure why or what the reasons were behind that. Maybe it was too complicated to travel. But of all the Orthodox singers in mainstream music, many of which, since then have gotten like a major record label to sign them. Like back in the day, Matisyahu was a big one, signed by Sony, and now Shulam Lemmer. My father and his partner were the first. They had like CBS Records sign them, which was like a huge deal back then. It was unheard of. And they had the best-selling record in Israel. Problem was that back then you had to ship vinyl records to the English speakers. You had to go on a ship across the ocean to America, and there was not a lot of profit left in it. But
Right.
those masters eventually got lost in a fire, and we had really
Oh.
hard time getting them digitized, for modern media now. After my father passed away, his best friend Shopsy Kresge gave me like a folder full of like MP3 files, which to the best of his ability and with whatever equipment he had, he managed to transfer, but like the quality was very low, like low. It wasn't done in like I think like the best equipment that could have been done on, and obviously they were played by from albums and tapes and records that were played for many decades. So if you ever heard like what a cassette tape sounds like after it was played 900 times, or a record for that matter, a vinyl record, they get scratched up and beat up. And so I was
Yeah,
always
it's
thinking like it'd be
impossible.
great. I was like, it'd be great if we can remaster these somehow, but you need to get a really good quality original thing to begin with. I reached out to this facility in California. They said, yeah, what we need to do is really, if you don't have the masters, just get like unopened, never been used record. And he's telling me as if it's something I can do. I've been on a waiting list for well over almost a decade and a half to get vinyl records on this marketplace called Discogs. And
Wow.
Discogs is like the Amazon marketplace of vinyl, so to speak. It's not really Amazon's thing, but it's like in the sense that there's a lot of different sellers and you can all sell whatever you want. And so anytime like a new record of his became available, like I got a notification by email right away, and I can see if it's better than what I have based on the condition that it's in and everything. And anyway, the day I spoke to this gentleman in this facility, after waiting forever and never getting anything above like medium good, three different sellers reach out and or not reach out but posted, and therefore I got a notification saying that these records are available. And I checked; they're all mint condition, unopened, never been played. And I was like, "That's Minas
Whoa.
Shemayim." I was like, "A miracle!" Like I told my wife, like the odds of this happening after waiting so long to find them all on the same day is like hitting the Powerball 3 days, 3 weeks in a row. And
Yeah,
so
it
I was
kind of
very
gives like
excited.
validation for working this hard to put the project together.
Right. So I did I picked them all up, and I as soon as I got them I shipped them out, and I had to speak to them to figure out what's the best way to ship them because I don't want to God forbid risk damaging them or anything. Like I have my one shot. I'm not gonna mess it up. And so I shipped them out and I got them all remastered into like 32-bit audio, which is like better than CD quality sound, which is like 16-bit
Right.
audio. And I remember when I got to listen to them for the first time, I was like I never heard my father this clearly since I spoke to him in person. Like really
Wow.
rich quality sound. And it was like all good like analog warmth that you'd get from a record. Anyway, so I've been releasing them slowly. I had first the first two Megama albums, and then those were released in 2024. And this one I'm releasing this Friday. So
Nice.
this one has songs like Yosef My Son.
That's a
Um,
great one.
I love that song. So there's a good story behind the song. Is one of the few hits that my father recorded that he didn't actually write himself. I think almost all of the music, with very few exceptions, he wrote himself. Um, unless it was like a parody of something they did. This one was actually written by a bacher that used to hang out at his coffee shop. My father, after Megama split up, opened a Moshe's Coffee House in Jerusalem. And he actually has a plug for it in the back of this record. It says, on the narrow side street of Zion Square in Jerusalem, you'll find Moshe's Coffee House. Moshe Yess, formerly of Megama, is a proprietor. The coffee house is the first of its kind in Israel. It's a place to hear good music, live, including many originals, as you'll find on this album. And yeah, a lot of people throughout the years wound up passing through, not throughout the years, throughout the short period of time that this was open, since my father never had a degree in business management or whatever it was. It didn't last very
Yeah.
long. But during like the 6 months or so that before it flopped, a lot of people went through there. And I've heard over the years many people tell me, like, oh yeah, I remember seeing your dad at the coffee house. And I was like, oh wow, that's like a really small window that you had to be there. So this guy
Right.
that one of the guys that hung out there was this guy named Morty Rockman. If I'm not mistaken, is now like a Rosh Hashiva somewhere, but he doesn't go by that name when it comes to music. He goes by the name Ellie Nathan. Ellie Nathan is the guy that did the Destiny albums. So he wrote the song
Yes.
Yosef My Son.
Wait, what's his name again?
Ellie Nathan.
No, but his real name.
I think it's Morty Rockman or Rockman. I never really got it right. Like
Oh,
yeah,
that's. I love the Destiny
crazy.
albums. I
So now
love
that
it.
you hear that, now that you hear that it was the guy that wrote the Destiny albums that wrote that song, you can kind of hear it because the stories that he says in those albums are always amazing. And so,
Yeah,
so now
they were
now it sounds
great.
familiar because the Yosef My Son is right up his the kind of song you can hear him sing. I was
Oh yeah.
honored and privileged to do a cover of this song a few years back. I remember like I rarely, anytime I've ever done a cover of one of my father's songs, felt like I did it justice, like the original. And this one, I can say, like I always felt a deep connection to the song, and I wanted to really give it its proper, like cinematic arrangement and feel, and like that's what I did to it. Originally on the album, it's just like a guitar and his voice and very little instrumentation, whereas this one had like a whole string section and sound effects and like I shouldn't say this out loud, but I even sampled like in the part of the song where like they fast forward in time from when the guy was a little boy, and then all of a sudden the Holocaust happens. I even sampled in that little small musical part in between those time periods, like a little sample of like one of those Nazi speeches from Hitler. Like even I hope he's rolling in his grave, knowing he's on a Jewish album.
Yeah.
But long story short, I put it out there a while ago, and I've been trying to cover his music a lot because there wasn't really good quality stuff out there, and I didn't want people to
Right.
forget it or to lose it, and I wanted the next generation to appreciate it and give a little bit of a more modern, polished sound, just because whatever was available wasn't really great quality. But after doing probably like a dozen covers of my dad's stuff, some of the songs that were never even released before on a proper album, like he had a band called Burn Offering, which had a bracha from the Rebbe to go out and sing for secular crowds and teach them about the increasing in acts of goodness and kindness and prepare for a world of good, things like that. So a couple of songs that I produced were ones that were never released before because for whatever reason that album never got signed, even though they tried sending it out to every record label and they were hoping that it would like, if the Rebbe gave it a bracha for sure, it's going to be like, the golden ticket. But for
Right.
whatever reason, it didn't take off. And so I got a couple of how would I say this? Unpublished gems that I got to do myself, which is really nice. Um,
Nice.
but now, thank God, I mean, thanks to this miracle that happened to me last year, like I was able to really put out some really good quality stuff. And Mishpacha magazine even covered it with a really incredible article, which they wrote about the story. And big props to Barbara Ben Susan for publishing that for Mishpacha. And she's an incredible researcher too, and was able to find some really good details. I'm not an investigative journalist. Like she was actually able to find details about Magama that I didn't even know. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And so I've been putting it out, and ever since that article came out, I've been getting a lot of feedback from people that read it. And one person actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I work for this university, and we have like an archive that people submitted their albums and music archive for research purposes or whatever." And the people submitted like their own media, and the university on their equipment got a lot of the stuff transferred. So even the things that came out after the three that I got, um, I have some better quality versions of it. So I'm excited to be able to help,
Wow.
re-release a lot of this stuff lately. And for myself, most importantly, like I always, told my father, like I wanted to be able to continue kind of like whatever you've been doing. Like I've seen the impact that his music had on people, on their lives, on their connection to God, and like how impactful it is, not just from on a single person's level, but like entire families are affected by it. Like I know a person whose mother went to a concert, came back, kosherized their whole kitchen. Now all her kids are from, and now one of the kids is a shliach, and he made another 250 people from, at least. So like
Wow.
that's just one incident. So the butterfly effect of this was like enormous. And I asked him like, can I get the chords for and the lyrics for all your music? He's like, I to be honest, I haven't played a lot of these in so long because towards the end of his life, my father was pretty sick. He's like, and honestly, at my age, I don't even know if I remember all the lyrics or the chords to them. Some songs I haven't played in 20 years. So he was like, but I'd rather, if you want to cover them, be my guest. But I think that it'd be a good idea instead of, being a second-rate version of me, be a first-rate version of yourself because your generation is going to have its own challenges and the way you grew up and the experiences that you had in life are going to have you being able to relate them to other people is going to have a profound effect on a whole different segment of people that even I couldn't reach, and
Right.
so he says, you have my blessing, but don't not put out your own stuff. So I was very encouraged by that, and I put out, many years ago, about 12 years ago, my first English original song, which was called "The Almighty Is on Our Side," and it was written during the original Gaza War. Not this one,
Oh,
the one that
wow.
happened like Gush Katif and all. It gave me because I was born in Israel, I guess. I always felt this strong connection to the land and everything that's going on in there, and I haven't been back there in a long time. I'm supposed to go back for my son's bar mitzvah, which was October 21st, but 2 weeks before October 7th happened, and everything got canceled, and so I was looking forward to reconnect there. Have you ever been to Eretz Yisrael?
Yeah, I've been there twice, but it's been so long. I've been trying to get there ever since, but
It changes
I
you
always
though.
imagine, right? I always imagined like I could so see myself just land and start sobbing like crazy. I just don't, I don't know how to explain it because it's, you know how you know how they say that like you actually dream something, like they say like you actually dream something and you feel it and you could, and it's like something that you can't explain. I've constantly dreamt of like how it would be when I go to Israel. And like I always dreamt the fact that like literally your feeling changes as you land or like or you see something. Like I've always put myself through many scenarios of thinking how it went. And so I'm very anxious to go there, Mitzvah Shem, and
Yeah,
to
me
experience it
too.
myself.
Me too. I got to go. I was born there, but I left when I was very young. I remember very small amounts of what happened when I was young there. But I got to go back when like my early 20s and birthright, and I'll tell you, like, at that point in my life, I think I needed it. I think for me, it was like a big catalyst for change in my life. I was never really good at yeshiva, but after birthright, I got connected with organization partners in Torah, and they gave me a chavrusa, which I learned with for many years, and without ever meeting them in person and many years later, I think I wound up finally meeting the guy in person. We'd always just learn on the phone, old school, before Zoom and
Wow.
WhatsApp and all that stuff. On
It's
a
funny
lot of
because
things.
I when I was a kid, I also had a chavrusa. There's a My Shliach program where they compare young shluchim to bachrim. And only last year, when I went on bacher shluchis to LEC in Florida, I one of the teachers is the bacher I learned with.
Oh,
So
cool!
like it was like
Wow.
such a different experience because I met him once, but he was a bacher then, and he went through so much life changes, and he had his own story in his own right. But the idea that like it's like a different connection, and you literally it's like it's a whole different experience than just meeting a friend and then seeing him many years later because it's more of a deeper level in a
Yeah,
sense.
because you have that connection, and you. I think there's a certain bond that's forged between somebody, people that learn Torah together. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, that becomes part of you, and that's an experience that you take with you, not just, in this world, but in the world to come. You get that, both of you
Right,
together.
right.
So it's a big deal. And I feel like that being in Eretz Yisrael had like a huge impact on me, and I was kind of hoping to have it for my oldest son, who never got to go. But I know my father sang a lot about it and how, people should be going, to Eretz Yisrael. There's a famous song from Magama called "Coming Home," which I got to cover last year
Yeah.
during,
Also,
right after
up to Jerusalem.
Up to Jerusalem's another one. Yeah, I covered that one too, I think. But coming home was like a big one back when he wrote it because it was in the late '70s and people were finally, feeling okay, enough time passed after World War II. We have our own land, we have our own army. Things seem like they're safe, and people were like on the fence about if you should go to Israel or not. And it changed his life, changed my mother's life. It changed a lot of people's lives to go there and to live there. Just every second that you're in Eretz Yisrael gives you like another mitzvah, you know? Breathing
Yeah.
holy air. I can't explain it. The only way you can breathe
Yeah.
holy air over here is if you buy a bottle of Israeli wine and open the cork and breathe in that little space that they have in it. Yeah. People don't really bottle the stuff, you know? But but I think that it had a huge impact on me, and he had a huge impact on him going there. He wasn't crazy about how, secular Eretz Yisrael is becoming. Like to him, like he had like he was like on the fence about how much he should love the land. You know, he wasn't like that. He was, God forbid, uh, anti-Zionist or anything like that. But he was like, he felt the government could have been a little more Shomer Shabbos and Torah mitzvahs and all that stuff, which
Right.
is ironic because his Hebrew birthday is on Yom Ha'atzmaut, so it's kind of.
Really?
Probably, yeah. I remember
Oh wow.
he always had like a little bit of I don't know if it's a grievance about it or not.
Now Lubavitchers has something to celebrate on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Like
There
until
you
now, it's
go,
like,
you know.
now you have something.
Not just Lubavitchers. I mean, my father had his music was all over. It wasn't just Lubavitchers. I have a good
Right.
example
Yeah.
as a very good example of how far-reaching the choices he made in his music were. A lot of people that were already very well established in the music business tried new things because of him. Like a good example is Devekis, A.B. Rottenberg. Was
Yeah.
doing Hebrew language music, and then I remember I bought his music like sheet music book of all his songs for Journeys, more than once. I told him I think this is the only book I think I bought 3 times. Every time I take it somewhere to Kumzets, it magically grows a pair of legs and walks off. I'm like, and I instantly Michael the person because if I discovered your music in a book for the first time, I would also steal it. But I told him like he wrote in the foreword of his book that he like my father's song My Zadie, and after hearing the Bagama record, it gave him the inspiration to start and or the push even to start writing in English. And the first English song that he ever wrote was right after he heard My Zadie, and it was called "It's Time to Say Good Shabbos." Time to say good Shabbos. So that was his first
He
like English
composed
song.
that song.
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Wow. Because
It was
most
on
people think
Journey.
it's AB.
No, no, no. It was an AB song. I'm saying
Oh,
AB wrote
oh,
that song after hearing English music from
oh. Oh,
Magama.
AB composed because
Yeah.
he was inspired by Moshe Yes for My Zadie. Oh, that's good trivia. That's pretty cool.
And it wasn't something that he was quiet about. Like he said it many times. Like he in interviews and his songbook, like he showed a lot of hakaras towards my father for whatever the
Yeah.
relationship that they had
Yeah.
musically
I
and
remember when my parents bought the fourth Marvelous Music Machine that A.B. Romberg made in 2011, I
yeah, he
believe.
had the little
And
yeah.
yeah, and it was like a part of the cover was a whole page just for your father, and I thought it was beautiful. And even from a child, as a child, you don't really hear these things, especially it was like a little bit before it was like the peak internet. So, but like I remember like thinking like, wait, because I read it, I was like a little old enough to read it, and I was thinking to myself like, wait, like I didn't hear your father passing away. I knew he was a little out of the business a little bit because I remember it being more old and sound, and I remember as a kid being very like taken aback that like, oh wait, this is not the same Marvelous Music Machine, but like what I mean, like I remember like it was pretty beautiful for me to see like a whole page and talk about it, and so I think I think that actually inspired me as a kid to really look more deeper into music because I do believe that music, if you think of it as an aspect of a story, it changes a lot for how you listen to songs.
Yeah. No, certainly. And if you start like looking at, like what he went through in his career and the sacrifices he made in his career as a secular artist. I mean, he had his own show in Reno. He was pulling in like talking about the '60s, like $2,500 a night was a lot of money back then. Like you
Wow.
could buy a Cadillac back then with that kind of money. That's what people were paying him to, and then giving it up and going to live in Mea Shearim in like a one bedroom air conditioned apartment where the air conditioning consisted of a broken window with no glass in it, and not doing music for a few years, and then getting into it, and finally, like you see, like he had Hashem probably like it feels to me like he gave him a opportunity. You can have success, you know, in begashmias or success beruchnias, but you can't
Yeah.
have both. Or maybe he could have had both. I don't know. But point was like
Right.
he had tremendous success Baruchnius from his music, and all the people that have been inspired by it and that have done tshuva because of it, and there are many. I hear stories all the time from people. I know countless Chabad houses that sing My Zaidi and several other songs at their Shabbos table every week. Um, and in the Lubavitch Ventures in the earlier days, there weren't that many English songs, but I remember at one point there were 12 songs, nine of them my father wrote. Like that's how much,
Right.
his stuff was loved. Why did I bring it up? Because I think that it's imperative that people realize that there's a story behind every song. Um, it kind of like took his experience as a Baal Tshuva and made it relatable, documented it through music. Gave people who are Baal Tshuvas, that did not grow up from birth, that oftentimes feel ostracized and on the outskirts and fringe within their own communities. Um, uh, the message that it's okay. You're not doing this for anyone else's approval. It's for Hashem's approval only. And Hashem loves you more than anybody else in the world. And to him, you're the apple of his eye. And don't worry what people might bully you because you do this that way you speak funny or whatever it is. Like it doesn't matter. Like you made the right choice. And a lot of people I know that are, for example, have converted to Judaism, that go through all the difficulties of what that must be like. Imagine, you know, and they relate to it as well. Like it's a very small niche in the music business that he catered to, but a very important one. Like the people
Right.
that were born and went through the yeshiva system, and their parents up for 25, 30, 50 generations were from with long payas or whatever. Like they don't need that kind of chizuk. They have it already. Whereas the people that are like literally, flying without instruments, like one of his songs is titled. He had a famous, song called "Flying Without Instruments." It's about like Hashem. I'm on the pilot of this plane, and all my gauges and dials aren't working. Like I have only you to guide me.
Right.
I'm like he used a lot of these like parables and like comparisons in his music to express what it's like to not just be him, but to be people like him that are learning the ropes for the first time and have this love for Hashem and for the people and for Judaism, but feel like they're always sometimes coming up short. Like I want to be a tzaddik. But how am I going to do that? Like I could barely read Hebrew. Or okay, it's like they always feel like
Right.
there's this lesser than thing. And he's explaining like no, on the contrary, like it's not that you're lesser than. There's a famous pasuk that it's where Baal Tshuva stands, like a tzaddik can't even stand. You know.
Right.
And someone was explaining to me like kabbalistically, there's all these different shars, these different gates, and like with 50 gates I think total, and like the 49th gate uh, is a gate of music. And then and a dear friend of mine, Menashe Friedman, was like, the problem is that people, when they reach that gate of music and takes their neshama to this really high place, they forget to knock on the ceiling of the next level up, which is Shara Tshuva. And so you
That's
just got to knock,
interesting.
you got to let it take you to these heights, and then just knock up there, and then set the worlds are open for you. So he's
Right.
uh he's definitely a person that made an impact, not just as a Baal Tshuva on a lot of people, but as an artist, as a musician. The amount of artists that he's inspired, I mean, myself included. And I grew up loving his music, not just because my dad, I wasn't forced to, but because I, I, growing up in a home where my mother was a convert, my father was a Baal Tshuva, like I got a double portion of this non-yichusdik,
Right.
serving of non-yichus coming from it. But I felt that it spoke to me as much as it spoke to many people, and I had my own journey in life where I was trying to figure things out, and it kept me anchored to a certain degree. And many of the songs I felt resonated with me, even in my experience, even growing up, in a Frum house. Even though I was from, I mean, my father was still learning the ropes every day, for the rest of his life, as we all are. My own journey had a profound impact on me. It's a very hard act to follow. Um, I would say, for me at this point in my life, impossible to really live up to the level of virtuosity that he had in his, you know, how he plays his instruments and things like that. Uh, and like his knowledge of music was profound. Um, but for myself, I can say that he definitely had a strong impact on me. Other musics in the same genre as him also had a very big profound impact, like Journeys, Destiny, Diaspora. Um, these guys were the
Your
bread and
father was
butter.
involved in diaspora?
No, but they were very. I mean, they were friendly. They did they did shows together, things like that.
Oh,
They
you're
just had
talking
a
about the genre in general. The genre in general.
yeah. No, I just mean that like
Oh,
the
okay, fine, fine. Yeah, yeah,
how would I define the genre of all these types of things? They're music that speak to the American Jew, in the
yeah.
language
Right.
that they understand and in a style that they appreciate. That's
But
how I
even
would
calling that, even to call it that category is kind of
very
understatement.
micro niche. It's an
Yeah,
understatement.
exactly. Yeah, because I'll
But
tell you why. Because there's something about your father's music, and also it's a compliment to the person, the pseudonym of Eli Nathan, a Destiny and Diaspora, is that
yeah,
they take music from a genre which, especially at that time, people wouldn't typically think would they would connect to, but for some reason they put their spin on it that really captivated not just the audience that they were targeting, but also the traditional audience that came from traditional homes, or people that doesn't necessarily your father, or maybe even your father didn't really think would captivate, like as you said, the people that came from already the European from life, or
yeah,
Hasidic life in general. So
yeah.
it's very hard to categorize it, but the only way I could say is that it really is just, it's something in its own category that really, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it was hard. It's hard to define exactly what he did. I think Avram Rosenblum from Diaspora Shiva Band, like when I made a post about this new album coming out Friday, he said that like my father was and he had a tremendous respect for my father. I was by his studio to work on a song with him, and he had a big poster of a show that Diaspora and Megama did together, like hanging outside his studio. So
Wow.
I was like, oh wow, that's sick. Like that's got to be a collector's item. Like I can't imagine. Like
Oh
and
gosh.
so they had tremendous respect for each other. But he did tell he told me that my father was like the top solo act in this whole like genre of like folk rock, of Jewish folk rock. There was like n nobody that can take just one instrument and and a voice and do what he was able to do with it. He really stretched it, I think, as far as it'll go. With just a single person and a guitar, and he had a funny sense of humor and a lot of shtick in his act and everything. Um, and it's fun to watch. I've been to so many of his shows. I was a roadie for him for many years, and when my brother and I helped him in the summer, we did these summer camp tours to like set up all his, his sound systems and everything. So
He once played for my Chabad house, Myrtle
interesting.
Beach, South Carolina.
Yeah, makes sense. That
Were you
makes
there,
sense.
or it was just him?
I probably wasn't there when I was going. I was very young, and I was in like I think like the like northeast hemisphere. How would I say this? Northeast, like upstate New York and Pennsylvania, Poconos and Jersey and like North Montreal and that whole area. Those kind of summer camps, like we call them like the YMHA groups and Federation camps. So he had a guy, Rabbi Schallenberg Baumgarten, who was like arranging. He was a shliach, and he arranged like a lot of these, like a tour, kind of at all the camps, because he was. I don't know how he was somehow involved in like bringing Judaism to these summer camps that would otherwise have, you know, less from entertainment or that kind of thing. And
Right.
what's interesting is that there's a guy. in Montreal named David Lazar. I remember him known as Steve Lazar back in the day. I remember when he had long hair and he was like this this rocker from like he had like a high school rock band back in the day. And he told me like my dad once came to his camp and my father was already like wearing his kapata and his vest and his tzitzis on the outside at that point. And he's like I was like this cool kid that had this rock band in my school, and we're hanging out with my friends, and they have this big tent, and like your dad comes in, he dressed like this Fiddler on the Roof guy, and he's sitting here with his guitar, and I turned to my friend, I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck. Watch. And your father just shredded up like this whole song. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. They're playing all they got their attention with songs that they knew, and threw in a couple of Jewish words to change it into like to Jewify the song.
Oh, that's so
And
good.
and he said it blew my mind. Blew my mind that a guy that can look like from where I was holding in life like such a nebuch, like he showed up and like he just rocked the house. He said, and
Yeah.
I remember like earlier, like I think he came to my house once for Shabbos or something. I remember him being by my house a couple of times, and then eventually like he was at Balchuva and he married a Sirota from Montreal, and they lived next door to us for a while. And I always loved his music because David came out with like he went by David afterwards. He came out with his own like heavy rock, heavy hard rock kind of album. And in the '80s, when I grew up, the hairspray bands and the rock bands, that was all the rage. And he was like Piamento was considered a rock, heavy rock kind of guy, but it to me it sounded very Sparty and it didn't sound like the American style that I was used to and
Right.
whereas David
Right.
Lazar sounded like the legit like I'd bring like these 400-watt speakers to camp and like blast it from the top of the Smithens Hill and Gani Yisrael and I played his album on repeat and I felt like there's a lot of people that they got turned on to Judaism through music. And this could very well be an example, but I'll tell you now, Dave Lazar is a shliach out in Montreal, and he works with young adults that are and I think college students or high school students and stuff, and it has a tremendous impact on their life. And it's amazing how far-reaching one person and their guitar and a voice can really go. And like I'm just talking about one city. Montreal, I'm talking about two people right now that became shluchim, uh, either directly or indirectly, but like that were touched or affected in a spiritual way um, through either knowing my father or his music or whatever it was. And I remember like growing up, we'd have a lot of interesting guests on Shabbos at our home. Like my father wasn't the type of guy that would invite over all every single person that was like on the top of the list of guests you'd want to have. Like he'd he'd like he had a special place in his heart for the underdogs and like for the people that weren't always invited and things like that. And like they became good friends of his. And they turned out to be okay. Some of them I'm still in touch with. But like it taught me also the importance of looking at every yid. Like, there's every yid is a piece of Hashem. And just because somebody speaks a certain way or looks a certain way or dresses a certain way or comes from this background or that back or has this challenge or has that challenge in life or whatever it is, doesn't mean like there's any reason to treat them less than or to be, to you know, like they're less Jewish than you or less important than you. Like everything is like if you have a person in your house that's like the biggest nebuch in the world, it's just as important as if you have somebody in your house who's like a big gadol or whatever that's coming to your house because every Jew is a piece of Hashem. And like that was inspiring for me to see growing up like that. Even sometimes when it was difficult, sometimes like we had people at our house that were just how would I say like they were very challenging to be around. You know, and he didn't he didn't treat him differently because of that. Like it was something that I try in my own life to kind of adopt, and I think the world can use a lot of that. The world's very full of vanity and appearances and what things, how would it look like? What would the neighbors think? That's what a lot of people
Right.
say. My father could not care less what the neighbors think. If you've ever been to Montreal, you saw the kind of car my father drove, you'd realize that not only did he not care what they think, but he wouldn't even care if the car he drove brought the property values down on the whole block. Like he used to
Yeah.
drive this like beat up old school bus that he painted like army camouflage or something. Like it was an eyesore among eyesores, and like he just didn't. It's a very liberating feeling. I say, I try to adopt it in my own life and think that like at the end of the day, what Hashem thinks about you is what matters the most. And one of the most liberating feelings in the world is being able to do what you know is right and do it for the right reasons and for the reason why we're doing it is because Hashem asked us to do it, not because it'll make the neighbors look at me in a nicer way or make this person think that I'm a good guy
Yeah.
or what. It's the wrong reason to do things. Like do things lishma, do them for the right
Right.
reasons. Um,
So it's so interesting to hear that because you find that very rare nowadays with a lot of I'm actually, to say the least, that the only way you could captivate an audience through music is if you're authentic. But I think your father took it to a whole different level where it was clear on stage that he was just there for you, for the music, for the avir. And I think it's something that you rarely see. I think other singers give a different atmosphere, but I think your father had like this, a lack of a better way to describe it, like a big hug type of
yeah,
uh atmosphere where he
presence.
was
Yeah,
literally,
he had a larger than life presence,
yeah,
and he had on stage certainly he had tremendous crowd control and stage
yeah.
presence. Like when he got on a stage and like everybody shut up when he took the mic. Like there wasn't like it wasn't like in shul like where the
Yeah,
rabbi is talking and everything. When he was there, he was like, "This is our moment now. Let's make the most of it," and people just it was magnetic to see. Um,
yeah,
I remember hearing Benny Friedman saying when they did a legacy album for my father
yeah. By the
after
way,
he passed away.
props to Benny Freeman because it's very hard to do a proper cover. That's like,
Yeah,
like the balance between, it's very hard to do like a balance between, like, not to be too much to you, not to be what you think. I think he did it perfectly. I
he
think
did a
I
great
think that
job. Yeah,
that album is top notch. By the way,
it
it's
was
not on
great.
Spotify. We need to get that on Spotify.
I'll have to work on it. There's a lot of politics behind that album, which I don't want to get into. But
Oh, okay.
the point is like this that I was involved in it. I also even liked how it came out, but I got mixed reviews from people that were saying that in some cases the songs were very true to the original, and in other ones they were uh like very different. And some people were like, I don't get it. Why do they do the song that way? It didn't sound like that. I was like, it's not an imitation contest. It was a tribute.
Yeah, it's
People from
not.
different
It's not. Yeah,
backgrounds and
exactly.
different styles of music wanted, say thank you to my dad, and they did a cover of his thing in their own way in some cases. In some cases, they
Right.
did it very, very original. I liked it either way. I liked how it came out, and
Yeah,
I
I
remember
loved
the
it. My
on
we listened to it more than my sisters. They listened to it like more than like the actual. Maybe it's because of the quality of what it used to be, but we jammed to that album so much, and it's also because it's just a beautiful feeling that you have an album that so many singers came together and they just came in. I mean
to show
to hear
appreciation.
Riri Schwabel, yeah, exactly. To hear Riri Schwabel sing "My Boy,"
Yeah,
in that way. It's like such a Riri
that's the way.
Schwabel
Yeah.
style, but it fits so well to pay tribute, and I love it. I love it.
I loved how certain songs on there, like I did not expect them to be the way they came out, but I love them nonetheless. Like a good example, one of my favorite Jewish singers, a guy that I discovered because of this album, Menachem Weinstein. So he
Yes,
was
yes,
earlier on in his
great
career
guy.
back
I
then.
know him personally. Great guy.
Yeah, so I met him a couple times, but he was like he did this number on the song called "Throw Away That Ham," where Menachem's a great rapper and he's like a great
Yeah,
producer too. And he did this like what was originally like this kind of Broadway style song. He turned it into like this really funky, like modernized rap song with pop undertones. I couldn't really define
yeah,
exactly what genre is. It was like a few of them all roll into one, but I loved what he did with it. It was super cool.
yeah,
And I like that because like production in music kind of takes the forefront a lot these days. Like yeah, I remember back in the day, people wanted to make an album, they had to sing perfectly. There was no such thing as auto tune. There's no such thing as
right.
everything today is overproduced, in my opinion, and including my own music. Okay,
Right.
I'm not innocent. Everybody does it. It's because that's what the sound became of modern music.
Yeah.
I think what made my father's
Which,
stuff
which, by the way,
very,
I think a lot of people are, based on conversations I have with people, I think the audience is really catching on to that, and I think that we have to somewhat, or someone has to come out with their music in the old traditional way, because I do
yeah,
believe that there are people that are hungry for, because people are not as people are knowledgeable more than ever, and I think people really could tell on these things. I was doing a reaction last
yeah,
week, and we could tell that it was like really auto-tuned, and it was a great song, and it was really sung well, but it was so jarring because you could tell. And so I think
yeah.
there is a market in the Jewish music world where people couldn't will enjoy if people just gradually just go to that side of
Transition
production.
back to what it was. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But see the that's the interesting thing that so a lot of the older singers uh were in the business. They were great singers. Like they didn't need
Yeah.
any of this stuff. A lot of them still apply some of it anyway, just to polish it up a little bit, and that's fine. But like today, like to get into the business, you don't have to be a great singer. Um, you have to have an excellent producer. That's really what it is.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of
Really.
people, like a lot of people I had even in my own studio that like I'd be like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, nobody would have ever suggested this guy to go to a recording studio when I was a kid. But this
Right.
person wants to do it, and the reality is that technology allows them to express themselves that way. So they're using whatever is available to them to for creative expression, and I'm okay with it. I'm a big First Amendment guy.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I
There's no
don't.
problem. It's an
Yeah,
art. That's what art
yeah,
is. Everyone has their
yeah.
own taste or their own spin in art. That's what it
Listen,
is.
if a banana duct taped to a wall on a museum of modern art can go for $1 million, like who's to say that a person that can't sing perfectly on key can't go into the studio and use a little autotune? Uh, I think what I'm getting at is that the industry changed because the technology changed. And
Yeah.
I was like growing up in this in between phase where I got to see my father record many albums, some of them on all the analog gear that they used to use, and then transition into like the digital world where people were using MIDI sequencers and things like that. Like I was arranging on a MIDI sequencer before Windows was even an operating system, like on a Commodore Amiga computer, the one that my father used to make the Amazing Torah bike and a few other albums.
By
Um,
the way, those songs are so great. I can't believe someone didn't like already come up with just like an album of just the songs itself. Those are great
oh, man,
songs.
I probably could do that. There was a interesting story. I mean, let me give you the backstory behind that album because since we brought it
Oh,
up, it
please
was
do. Please do.
so
Please do.
so my father and AB co-produced the Marvelous Middos Machine together,
Yeah.
as most people know. Not the fourth one, obviously, and I think the third one. I'm not sure if there was one episode in the series where there was a time machine,
Yeah.
right? With a little green chair from Gimbals, in the ship.
Yeah.
And so my father wanted to take the audience back into time during the times of Moshe Rabbeinu and like the Mitzrayim and the whole Exodus from Egypt and all that, Matan Torah and
Oh
all that.
wow.
And AB's like, no, like, I want to kind of get like an early American history version of like what Judaism was like back then. And so they decided to like my father would start a new series to do the Mitzrayim thing, and that's how the Amazing Torah bike came out. And so I was actually the main character. I was Binyamin, the kid that couldn't
Also in the
learn to
second
save
one?
his life. Yeah, and all of that. And so I didn't even have to act because I was already really bad at yeshiva. It was like I just had to be myself, you know. So I that was like my singing debut, I guess. Like the first time I was on an album was the Amazing Tour bike. And
Wow.
so that's
Well,
how that series
I gotta be
started.
honest. I gotta
Yeah.
be honest. I didn't really grow up. I mean, I had the cassette, but it was kind of ruined, so I didn't really grow up with the first one. But we had the animation on
Oh
VHS of
God.
the second one.
If you
That
can call it
animation,
that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I mean, mind you, you
but
have to realize that that animation wasn't made on a fancy Dell XPS, graphics computer. It was made on a
yeah,
Commodore Amiga with a 40 megabyte hard drive. Okay, there wasn't a whole lot of
yeah,
room to render 3D animations back then. It had to be done very,
yeah,
very, very, very low budget and low key and low resolution. And my father wasn't really a graphic artist. Like he wasn't artistically inclined in graphic art. My mother was. My mother was an incredible artist. And my father just used technology and doodles and things like that to try to figure out how to make things move and applied the thing to it. So he was kind of learning it as he went. He didn't like have any formal training on it. And I think a lot of people um, you know, uh, realize that, but also you have to realize that at that time there wasn't anything else that did that in the Jewish world. Like he was
right,
10 years
yeah,
ahead of 10 years ahead of his time to put out Jewish, graphic animations. It was like unheard of.
yeah, crazy.
And understandably, it was something that would look very like Minecrafty and low budget. But
Right.
at the same time, I'll show you something else here. This album here that I have a little like mini Moshe Yess museum on the wall over here of all his records.
Oh
So
wow.
this album was from before he was Frum. This was him on a band they had called Research 1612. I don't know if you can see it.
Wow.
So this was came out in
Wow.
like the 60s. This came out in the 60s, and what was later on described as psychedelic rock, they were doing it 10 years before anybody called it a genre. Like he was a little bit early on
Wow.
everything. Like if he tried everything 10 years later, he would have been like incredibly rich doing it. But
Yeah, that's
he was like,
crazy.
whatever, he was a little forward thinking like that and figured out a way to try to make it work the best he can with the resources he had and whatever.
He made more videos later though. I grew up
Yeah, he
with
did.
the I grew
Goldberg.
up with the Avram video on the VHS, which by the way,
Okay.
I'm petrified of Nimrod because of that video.
Fair enough.
That picture that
Is
just
that
kills
the one
me.
he did with Ruben Stone? Which one was that?
No, I think Moving Stone was the Helm videos, right?
Wait, the Avraham one was a 3D animation?
No, it was like pictures, like a
Okay.
clip art cartoon type pictures that would
Oh,
move.
interesting. Okay. Okay,
I
interesting.
don't know if you ever seen it, but he had an
I
Avram
don't think I
song.
have. I don't think I have.
Oh
All right,
wow.
very cool.
I
Now I
gotta
gotta see
find it.
that.
I hope my mother didn't
All
put
right.
it away somewhere. Like
Are you sure it
I'll
was
try to
his?
find
Or
it.
you made?
It
Okay.
it sounds like him. Like
Okay.
he had a song
Fair enough.
Abraham that what like God called him Abraham.
Okay.
Something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe my mind is just telling me things, but
Maybe
it
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 is.
was one of those videos. I'm pretty sure I remember like saying, oh, like because the words of who made the video came up, and your father name came up. And I'm pretty sure that it was him. Like he voiced everything, he
Cool.
just said everything.
All right. Cool.
I have to find it,
All right,
but
I'll have to check it out one day.
basically, yes, I
Because
grew up with
I know
that.
he
I
made a
also
bunch of he made a bunch of albums with Ruben Stone. And I think maybe it could be one of those or animation of one of those or something like that. That was
it
like
was a
later
video.
on.
I don't think it was a story tape, but yeah, I remember that.
Interesting.
I also
Cool.
remember the Helm videos. He did the Helm
Yeah.
videos, right?
Yeah.
Those were
So
those were
so he
pretty
he
fun.
kind of dabbled in a lot of stuff, and he was very big into the whole Jewish education thing. And like to me, it was interesting when I heard like I remember in the Mishpacha magazine article that came out with she spoke with Avi Rottenberg about like what it was like to work on the Middos machine. And he said in the article like he said yeah, like we remember we sat down the two older Yes boys, which was me and my older brother, together to give them like as our like test subjects to listen to the album. And we they seemed to entertain for a while, and then all of a sudden like they broke out in a fight during a song called Shalom is Peace. So we realized that we had to gauge our expectations on the effectiveness of this album on kids. But the reality is like it was still like some of these songs were so iconic that I remember like if I went to
Yeah.
like a group of 30-somethings a few years ago at a private concert in someone's house, and I broke out into like, "Who spilled the milk on the kitchen floor?" And everybody's like, "Oh my God, I haven't heard this song since I was a kid!" Like everybody knows that. We grew up on this stuff. This was like the bread and
I
butter
gotta
of kids.
send you it, but we have I have a friend that knows someone that made a remix. I don't know if you heard it. It's like a little 1 minute remix of the "Who Spilled the Milk Kitchen Floor," and it's like a dance track. I really need to show it to you. It's like
Oh no, I never heard that. I'd like to hear that.
I
Very
use
cool.
it for the kids in LEC. Like they literally like
Very
because
nice.
they grew up with the tape, yeah. And then when you have like something to get them hyped, especially when you're dealing with like hundreds of kids, so like you put it on and they really like it. So I have to send it to you.
Kids
Um,
still like it. I mean, kids. My son, who's like my youngest son, is like 2 years old, 2.5. I was playing the Middos machine for him, and he also like they take to it. It's
yeah,
like very relatable.
it never gets old. It ages so well. And by the way,
Timeless.
I heard mechanechim, um, because I'm in school, so in program director in school, so I hear like teachers mechanechim saying like they would it because it's not necessarily like Hasidic things. They're just simple midas type of lessons,
Yeah,
and so like
yeah.
but for some reason they all
It's
say that
good old fashioned
dark
Judaism.
right, and they all say that literally the mouse moves machine is by far still much better than. Not saying again, nothing against what people do nowadays. Art is art, and I love story tapes that are done nowadays and olden days. But especially mouse moves machine, it captivates something in the kids where it never gets old. Every kid
Yeah.
approaches it in a very unique way, unlike things that may age old or things that are newer. And I hear a lot of mechachim say that they'll pick that story tape over all other type of
It was
basic
also,
Judaism
I
story
mean,
tapes.
in its type of thing, like many people that I've spoken with have said, it's kind of like, because at one point I entertained the idea of doing like a kids tape with a few other people I knew. I actually started on it, and then I moved from Canada, and like it just flopped, and like I dropped the ball, and like we all got busy or busier lives, kids growing up, and like it's never really got completed, or it never even took off fully on the production side, and that, let alone the distribution or anything like that. But this one of the people was telling me, like, it's like the Middos machine. If we look at it as like this a prototype of like the perfect balance of storytelling and music and everything, it became like this
Yeah,
archetype in a way, like an archetypal kids educational album, which
yeah,
which had this timelessness to it. It's a classic, timeless album that it will be relevant, 200 years from now, God willing.
right.
But interestingly, a lot of the stuff that they were talking about back then were so futuristic, like that we couldn't even think about it. Like this a time machine, or like a satellite with a spaceship in outer space and things like that. And like people weren't even doing that kind of stuff, but now there's actually people doing that. Like the idea that you can broadcast audio to anywhere else in the world, that wasn't an option back then, really. Like
Yeah,
now you have cell phones, you have satellite, you have satellite internet, you have even like the concept of like the amazing tour bike, like an artificially intelligent powered bike. Like
yeah,
who even knew what AI was? I even know my father knew what AI was, but he was very like high tech in his stuff. Like he liked technology. He had like he was also a big like ham radio operator. Like he used to have like a shortwave radio, like a big military
yeah,
grade one in the house, and he'd listen to it all day. And not all day, like he listened to it a lot. And then he had a big thing for like things that were just like emerging, like emerging technologies. And some
yeah,
of these things I don't even understand how he understood like what they were, and
yeah.
robots and
By the way,
AI.
a proof to that is because the Mouse Machine 4, it's amazing, by the way. I love the songs because you can't go
Yeah,
wrong
they're
with Amy
great.
Romberg and Shlomo Simcha.
Yeah,
But I think it did miss that futuristic, like a kid's imagination in a story.
yeah,
Like it didn't have like it kind of like continued from where it left off, but it never like went off on more
yeah.
than like the idea of like what's next, what's in 10 years. Like I don't know how this works, but let's just do it, But
Yeah,
and
that's
I
great.
think it
And
really
how many times parents nowadays when one kid is like upset that the other kid got something like Yankee got a bigger piece. Everybody does it. My mother did it to us. Like we all get it. We have these little sound bites that we can throw out at our own kids that we're being recycled from our own parents using them today, and like it's great. Like I use them with my kids, and they just smile at me and smirk, like okay, like they get it. But maybe it's time to do some of that. I never tried it like really like today. Like I could technically do these things solo. Like there's so much like I don't even need voice actors anymore.
Right.
Like you can literally, I'm the first probably mainstream like Jewish industry like artist that has a like that used AI in a track. I just released a track called "Calling My Name," where I recorded into a mic and then I was able to change my voice exactly how I sang it, but with someone else's voice from any number of different voices, like the way you would change a font in a
Wow.
document. And so you can literally create a whole cast of people just as a single solo production. Like you don't even need like the technology is
Yeah.
so advanced, so you don't have to hire 50 different people as long as you can make a few accents and like the rest of the timbre of your voice can change to somebody else. I can make myself into a kid or a woman's voice or whatever character I need to cast for it. So maybe it's time I start doing that. Maybe I should try my hand at that. I just feel like it's like such a big shoe to fill and such a big talking about giants like AB and my father who put these things together. Like
Right.
I'd never be able to outdo it, but just maybe make a little mark on it. The closest thing I
Well,
can
I
think
think it
of is
just I think it goes back to what you said before that I think your father did left you off with the message that I don't think you're supposed that not just you, I'm saying in general, people nowadays a lot of people are trying to validate themselves comparing to a different standard, to a certain standard. And
yeah,
I think it's just at the end of the day, it's just to be you, be authentic. Like when I do content and when I do reactions, people like who knows that song? I'm like, I'm not doing it for the views. I'm not doing it for like
yeah, you
necessarily
do
for
it for
anyone to walk by. It's me.
it's
It's
you.
me.
Right. There's a concept in Judaism only. It's called it's good enough. We don't have that in the immigration laws. But interestingly, I did do a couple of small things. I had some people reach out to me because when I got into recording originally, I was doing voiceover work for video and things like that. That's how I got my first studio set up and everything. And I did some
Huh.
like earlier commercial voiceover stuff for JLI and different things through a friend
Oh,
of mine who's
cool.
doing video for them. But I got to do a couple of like audio books for kids, which were then animated. Like I did like the Pesach book, the Purim book, the story of if Candles Could Speak by Dasi Pross. These are like long like audio format books, which were played in many Chabad institutions and different places. I got to be the voice artist for Bella Bracha Zadie, which was fun.
Oh,
Bella
cool.
Bracha.
That was a little after my time, but yeah, it's
Me too. I am like, who's Bella Bracha? I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? I've been out of the business for so long that I remember a person once told me, like, hey, my friend of mine wants to get the whole collection of your father's music. He's a huge fan. His name's Benny Friedman. I'm like, who's Benny Friedman? I didn't even know. Like, I was like completely oblivious to like, I completely checked
yeah,
out from like, like who's who in the business. I was only listening to the old stuff and didn't really care to go out and buy new albums. But now, obviously, I know who he is. I know everybody, like these other guys. Some of them. I mean, there's so many nowadays. I was saying, like, telling somebody
yeah,
today at work that my Father's Day, there was like 25 people that were like really like mainstream, artists that everybody knew. Today, there's like 250. And that's might
right.
even be minimizing it. There's probably more than that. You know.
Yeah, so much more.
So,
Especially when I got into the idea of doing reactions, which by the way, Destiny was my very first review video ever.
oh,
It
cool.
was last year, so that was pretty
They're
interesting.
so
Also, your
good.
father, the first song I did a review of your father was the Angel, no, the Lord of Hosts. Uh,
Oh, nice.
uh,
I love that
that was
one.
a
Yeah.
good song.
Shem once
But
made an
my
angel. Gotta do that one. I gotta cover
gave
that
him
one day.
quite a short. That's such a good song. But my
We should
point
do it.
is that
I'm curious of you to do a reaction of my song that had that AI in it, calling my name. It was a background vocal. It wasn't like the main vocal. Main vocal was still my voice. But I'm curious to see what you'd say to it because it's very like different. It's a different type
got it.
of
I'll
different vibe.
I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll probably do it around the time I come up with this episode, so that kind of like gives a backstory of
Yeah,
where
cool.
the reaction came from. Do you have any backstory on collaborations between Moshe Yess with outside of the genre that he was typically in? Like he did one with Miami Boys Choir. I'm curious if he did one with Miami Boys Choir and the Miami Experience too.
I
Um,
remember that one.
yeah. I'm very curious if he ever did like collaborations with like typical singers that wouldn't be in his genre, like maybe Alan Freed, or I'm just curious. Is there anything you might know?
He's done quite a few, but I'll say this. I mean, as a kid, and a kid that was in a choir, Miami Boys Choir was a big deal. Like to us, it was like in Montreal, which is a very small town, like compared to New York City or whatever. Although it's a major city, it's still like it's never New York or LA or anything. I
Right.
always felt like my father was like this local guy that everybody knew. They went to the same mikvah as him. They wasn't anybody
Yeah.
special. When you go outside of Canada, all of a sudden, like you realize all these people like were like worshiping the ground they walked on. And I was like, until he was on Miami Experience, I never thought he was truly famous.
That's so
Again,
good.
he was rich. I was like, oh, he
The
finally
song,
made it. You know?
the song
But
that he
the
did on the road, was that his song or Yechmel Begun's
no,
song?
that was their song.
But it fit him so well.
Yeah,
I really bought it that it was his. You
I mean
know?
they made it his. I mean, so was the Ninth Man from A.B. Rottenberg. That like the one about the baseball game. The
He
Rebbe
didn't
used to
compose
teach
that?
his Torah. He didn't compose it. No, it was A.B. composed it. But
Oh.
he was casted for it, and it became like a song that he made his. He'd perform it a lot everywhere he'd go. People ask him to sing it. I sing it still when I go places. It's a favorite by a lot
You
of
probably
people because
connect
they
to that
remember
song
it
more than
very
yeah.
much
It's
so.
probably one of
And it's
it's
also nostalgia. It brings people back to this place in their Jewish experience that was comfortable before the world got complicated. Before like it's a nice little safe space, as the modern world would
right.
call it. Um, but yeah, he did collaborate with a lot of other artists. Not so many that he was actually that I remember him being like a vocal artist on there, but on production side or like songwriting stuff. There was a singer in Montreal named Yossi Rosenblum, who I think moved to Florida eventually. And his
Sounds
first album,
familiar.
yeah, he's a nice guy. Actually, he owned a small music store in Montreal for a while, where I bought one of my first guitars. This one here. I saw it and I fell in love with it. It was so cool.
Oh wow.
I remember
I
I
could
was like,
so see you. That's such a you guitar.
yeah, so that's why I saw it. And listen, I couldn't afford it, and he was nice enough to let me pay $100 a month until I paid it off and then take it out.
Oh
And
wow.
so he had a connection with my father, where like my father I think wrote the song on his album called "The Winds of Change." It was a song that Yossi sang, but my father wrote it for him. Um, and there was he worked with several others. I think there was another song that another album that he may have been involved with called Jerusalem Echoes, and another guy named Shalom Kogel or something. I met his son at some point. Like I can't remember the. It was I'm trying to remember things from like decades ago, where he was involved either on a production side or vocally to small in a small part. But his collaborations with like more mainstream artists, I never, other than Miami Experience and like the Haas concerts and the other things he's been at, like I haven't really, I don't think he's been on many. Journeys was a big one. I mean, maybe was very much up there, and he was on I think the first three Journeys albums. Um, I
Yeah.
was very privileged. I was very privileged to be on the fifth one, which was like a dream come
Yeah.
true for me. And
Yeah.
it was really
That's a
beautiful.
funny video where it was you and AB where you were dancing to the Ain't No Official.
Yeah. So that was
That
in
was
Doni Gross's studio. I remember my
yeah. Which Doni Gross is a legend.
yeah, he
I
is.
can't say that enough. He's a legend.
In the Jewish music world, from my understanding, is like every like 10 years or so, a new producer comes on the scene that just tears everything up and like
Yeah.
becomes like a legend. And Doni Gross is now like the it guy that everybody goes to. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, he's so good. He's so good, and it was
Oh yeah.
a huge honor to work with him and to work with AB and to meet them both.
He's
And
one guy where you could tell, like he even said this in the I think it was a Mishpacha interview where he himself was saying like I'm not that much of an open guy, but you can tell. Or actually, it was like it was when he was doing his Aish interview and they interview him in Israel or something. But anyway, but he was basically saying how like he's not like that of a person that's out there like in a personal level, but you could tell he has so much in him. Like you literally see him like he can't sit. You literally see him when he sits down or when he like his mannerisms. Like he has so much in it to express. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
he's an incredible producer and arranger, and I just like as a producer. I'm not like a massive producer like him, but like it's always fun to watch other people's like thought processes and how their creative process develops. And while he's working, he's just working so fast. These ideas are coming at him
Yeah,
like really like he's like, okay, now do this, I'll do this an octave higher, and like we're just like we're banging them out like pancakes. And I can't imagine like how many hits this guys have made. Like he's just like
yeah,
you can't even count them at this point. But there's thank God, technology advanced so much so that anybody the cost of entry to get into this business is so low now. Anybody with a computer at home and a decent sound card and a relatively decent microphone, which is not it doesn't even cost that much today, can get their feet wet and get started at it. And once you develop enough of a following or a knack for it, you can upgrade your equipment. And over the years, that's what I've been doing. And I got to work on some nice gear that in his studio, and I was like, "Oh, cool! So that's what you're using." And I'm like being the
yeah.
gearhead, looking, "Oh, that's the mic that you're using, or that's that vocal strip that you're using." And I always imagined his studio would be like much this big, huge type of room, but it was like it's just in the basement of his house, And I'm like, "This is where all these hits are coming out of. This is amazing," you know.
Yeah,
The amount of music my father was be able to make with a guitar and a voice, like this guy's putting out hits in the same type of
yeah.
real estate, you know?
I do have one idea for you before we end up.
Yeah,
It's not something to
sure, yeah.
elaborate, but one idea.
Yeah, what's up?
What do you think of an idea of you harmonizing or singing along with old tracks of your father? Would that be something you would be interested in? Because I would love that. Like
I
I've seen
had the
singers do it. Like yeah,
I
go ahead.
had I had the idea to do that. Again, until very recently, like it would have been impossible because we don't really have good quality enough digital things of my father's music.
Yeah,
Whereas a lot of that changed because now there are. At the same time, you're not the first person to suggest this. As much as I would feel like it'd be a huge honor to do that, I know that as an artist myself, you don't want to take someone's original thing and then just like put your own watermark on it. It's
makes
like
sense.
I don't
Yeah,
want to. I would feel like I would taint the original uh, uh, thought of what it should be. I, although I would love to do it, but I feel like my father
yeah.
might like ask Hashem to strike me with lightning for doing it. I don't know. Yeah.
As the artist in you is telling you, it's the artist of you basically.
As the artist me is saying, don't disrespect somebody's work by trying to like
Yeah,
piggyback on it. Like I covered his stuff and made pretty decent versions of his things on my own. What I might maybe try to do is sample his voice into a cover that I'm doing,
that's
but
nice.
not. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it the other way around.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it would be a
Yeah.
little.
It makes total sense. It makes total
mm,
sense.
Yeah, like
All right.
Kibbutz
So
ain't a
thank
big
you.
deal for me. So I got like if my father wanted a
Yeah.
certain way. Another thing is like don't change the words for my songs. Don't make a song called my Shaitel instead of my Zadie. Like it's very particular about
Yeah.
keeping this thing authentic and true to the original. So like I'd like to keep that. If I can somehow squeeze him into one of my covers, if it's like maybe I'll consider that. That'd probably be a cool idea. I just got to figure out how to do it now.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. All right, so
Cool,
Tali Yess,
cool.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining.
Pleasure.
At the time of the
Thank you.
recording, you're
Pleasure.
coming out with the remastered of your father's solo album that's coming out this Friday.
It's
When the episode comes out,
Friday.
it'll be
Everywhere. It's going to be on. So right now, you mean the old version, which is a low quality, is available on like 24/6, and
yeah.
a few of these things, but not on Spotify or any of the other mainstream things. The This one will be like a 32-bit digital remaster and like super high definition audio. And this one is
Great.
going to be on the 24th. I think it's this Friday, whatever the date is. This Friday.
Yeah, the 24th.
23rd,
Yeah.
24th.
So yeah, so everyone
Yeah,
out
so
there,
look
please
out
check
for
it
it.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have any other personal projects that you're working on?
always. I'm always coming out with new music. And I try to like put out more original stuff than covers of my father's things because I feel like now that I got a lot of
Yes.
the older stuff back, like that, it's like an indication saying, okay, put out more you now, you know. But I have a few things cooking. My latest release was this one called "Calling My Name," and that song I just released like a couple weeks ago, and it was about how sometimes we're pushed into and forced into making a move, where like Hashem feels like we reached this plateau and like we're not moving, we're staying stagnant, and applies pressure in different areas of your life in different ways that manifests. And and some people look at it as, oh, I'm being victimized, like look how bad things are happening to me, or look how I feel like I'm not going anywhere. Look. And the reality is, it's just Hashem saying, hey, I'm calling your name. I'm trying to tell you, like,
Yeah.
give you a kick in the back seat of your pants to get you to move a little bit over here, but you're not listening. So move, make some positive
Yeah.
change in your life. So that's what this song is about. The song "Calling My Name" is about those times where we feel under tremendous pressure and it's like the example of a diamond. It has to be put carbon put under tremendous pressure to become a diamond, or like a seed that has to
Yeah.
like rot in order to grow life out of. So that's
Yeah.
what that song's about, and that's the one with the AI thing I was telling you about. To check it out, so I'd be curious to see your reaction to that.
All right.
And there's
Yeah.
other
So
things
I'll
cooking.
definitely react. Yeah, perfect. I'll definitely give
All
a
right,
reaction to that. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope we
my
talk
pleasure.
again. Go
Yeah,
deep.
same
It
here. It
was
was
really
a lot
meaningful.
of fun.
I really do feel like we went deep, and especially I love conversation like these. And thank you so much uh, for the fan of me to get these stories. Thank you so
Yeah, my
much.
pleasure. My pleasure. It was an honor being on your podcast. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing it.
All right.
Hands
Thank
you
you,
on.
son.
Okay.
I love the whole conversation. I never expected how deep he would go and detailed he would go, both personally and his personal life, and also with stories about his father. And I actually like kind of how we got to exchange a little bit where we were just talking to each other about music and about what we love and about our personal lives. And that's the point of the podcast, not just about to listen and get interested about people, but just to see, uh, just to have a conversation with someone is the main point. So that was nice. I am reporting right now from England, so that's the time when I'm releasing this episode. So I had to get this done for you guys. This episode had to be done. I had to put it out as soon as possible, and Baruch Hashem, I got the job done. Baruch Hashem, God is good. And please join me next week where we will have a very special guest, which I interviewed last week, and I can't wait to release it next week, which that will be announced soon. So please comment below other people at the Jewish entertainment industry that you would want me to have a conversation with and to bring it to you guys. That's all for you guys. So I would like to see your comments and your notes about this episode and for what you want to see in the next episode. See you guys later.